Hello and welcome to another episode of Great Women in Compliance with Hemma Lomax and Lisa Fine, produced by the Compliance Podcast Network and sponsored by Corporate Compliance Insights. Our guest today needs no introduction. She is none other than Kristy Grant-Hart, compliance guru, founder extraordinaire, and so much more. I've been dying to get Kristy on the podcast. I'm so thrilled that I get to do it, and this month is very special, so we'll talk about that. But Kristy, thank you for agreeing to join us, and welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast.
It is my absolute pleasure. Do you know, Hemma, I did the very first episode, I believe, of Great Women in Compliance, and that was probably 7 years ago. I was in London, so done that, and I did one 3 or 4 years ago. So it is time, and I am delighted to be back here.
Yes, it is definitely time, and I'm so thrilled that I get to sit with you. Every time we sit together and chat, we have fun. I learn something from you. I learn a lot from you. So I can't wait to kick in. One thing I realized when preparing for this podcast is I don't know how much we've talked about your origin story. I'd love to ask you about that and share that with our listeners. But before we do that, I mentioned this is a very special month to be having you here because you had a big announcement this month. So let you tell our listeners that haven't seen the announcements already what happened this month.
Yeah. So the origin story partially, I started Spark Compliance, which has been my consulting group nearly 10 years ago. And as of last week, we have been acquired by Diligent. The entrepreneur journey has come the full circle. And honestly, I couldn't be more delighted. It's going to be an amazing partnership where we're providing advisory services. They've never had that before for the whole compliance world. So Spark continuing to do its best work, but also helping with product design and development. Reach out to the community. I'm going to be doing tons of thought leadership for them. It is absolutely the most exciting thing that I think my professional life has ever held, and had a pretty exciting professional life. So
You certainly have. So we're going to hear more about that. But so I understand Spark Compliance is one of the most exciting things in the industry. You and the Sparkies are going to go over to Diligent, be part of their bigger brand or a brand under their brand. And you said you're going to be working on the consultancy arm. Is that right?
yeah, so they've never had an advisory services arm before. So what we're going to be doing is helping their clients, their customers, but also anybody that wants to come in and doesn't have their software, that's fine too. And we'll be doing our risk assessments, program assessments, policy reviews and creations, lots of training. Spark, before it was acquired, was working on some e-learning. We're bringing that over. We're going to be doing a lot of really cool stuff. So anything that you would call a consultant for, please call me still, because that's what we're doing.
That's great. That's great. What a boon for Diligent. Can you tell the audience a little bit about Diligent? Those that might not know what Diligent does or what they did before they acquired you.
Yeah, absolutely. So they actually have 25,000 customers, which I was like, wow, this is a big company, 1 million users, but their compliance arm is smaller than their boards, which is what is their most prominent product, at least so far. But watch what we're going to do. Their compliance suite includes things like third-party manager, it's their most popular compliance product. They also have a policy management software, complex management, compliance wave training that we're going to be boosting up. So they've got some really cool offering, and we're just going to make them even better.
Oh, you certainly are. I did a webinar with them recently, and they're just such a lovely, talented team. And so I think what a merge of talent, what a beautiful marriage of talent. Very excited for you. Congratulations, because as you said, as an entrepreneur, there's no greater success than an exit in this way, and being able to show that you've succeeded, brought the clientele with you, and somebody sees the value in what you've done. So that's just, let's pause and say congratulations for that. But also congratulations to Diligent, right? Again, as I said, what a boon for them. What a smart, strategic move for them, because I know that your existing clients will benefit from Diligent, and Diligent will benefit from you and the magnificent Sparkies that come with you. So well done, Kristy. Okay, so you mentioned part of your origin story is, of course, 10 years of Spark, but tell us how you got into compliance and what do you most enjoy about what you do in compliance?
So I come at it from a very unusual angle. I graduated from UCLA with a film and television degree. And so I worked in film and TV for several years in associate production work, worked on the Paramount lot. I worked on the King of Queens television program, for those of you my age, and all kinds of different show things. And I went and traveled a little bit. I'd gone to Europe on one of those $4 a day kind of trips. And I just hit the travel bug so hard. I was completely obsessed. And I was like, I was bored in film and TV. It didn't take enough of my mind. And I thought, where can I go that they'll pay me to travel? And I thought, I know, I bet I could be a lawyer, because I'd been in the debate team and all the things that the people who become lawyers tend to do. And so I couldn't afford to go during the day, like full-time law school. So I went at night. So I worked full-time during the day at an employment law firm, and at night went to school, graduated, went to big law at a firm called Gibson Dunn, And they were really heightening their FCPA practice because it was 2007, 2008. And it was when it was just this huge ascendancy. And Gibson was starting to do corporate monitorship. So I was staffed on the Siemens monitorship, which of course was the biggest anti-bribery case in the world at that point, and also one for a Johnson subsidiary in the med device area. And that was amazing because white collar crime defense is fascinating. And then I was moved to London to work on LIBOR, which is rate rigging in the financial services industry. And I was in Switzerland, London. I decided to go online dating because I was going to be there 2 years. Thought I'd marry an expat, find a guy, American out there. That is not what happened. I found Jonathan, my British husband, and decided to stay. And since I didn't have a solicitor's license, I didn't have a British qualification, I went to a recruiter there and said, listen, I'm going to be staying in London. What should I do? And he said, you've got anti-bribery, antitrust, you've got data privacy because of Switzerland. He said, you should go into compliance. And I was literally like, what? How do I do that? Well, but it's it. I was in the litigator mindset, right? And I interviewed and became the director of compliance for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And our friend Lisa Beth Lentini was my boss, which is sort of amazing to watch us both evolve the way that we had. And then, so I did that for a while. And then Paramount Pictures came and NBC Universal headhunted me. Keep your LinkedIn and watch it, friends, because that's how they found me. And they said, we're interested in you being the chief compliance officer for our joint venture, Paramount Universal Pictures, their distribution company in 65 countries. And I went to them and I said, okay, that's amazing, but why me? Basically, I was really pretty young in my career. And they said, you're the only person we could find with a film background who was a lawyer and compliance. And it was just this confluence of the perfect moment. So yes, I was there for several years. I got to go to movie premieres. So I promise you, when you're walking down the red carpet and Sandra Bullock is there and they go, lady, keep going. Like they really don't want you there. Like, walk past her compliance officer and friend. But it really was an extraordinary time for me. And if I hadn't wanted to start Spark so much, I would have stayed because it's an incredible job. But I did. And so my first book was coming out, which is How to Be a Wildly Effective Compliance Officer. And as it did, I thought there's never going to be a better time to get publicity and to be able to do the marketing angle for this. So I started it in my apartment, totally undercapitalized. When I look back, I'm like, you were nuts, girl. You were not prepared for this. But, life kind of worked out the way it did and we grew. I moved back to LA area where my family is during the COVID era, but we've got folks like Ellen Hunt in Chicago and Nicole DeShino in New York. We've got folks in Amsterdam and London. And I'm lucky because Diligent is brilliant and we're taking the Sparkies with us. So it's a really exciting time for all of us now.
Oh, what a whistle-stop tour of a fantastic career. I could spend the whole hour just asking you questions about bits of that. Let me ask you at least one question about your transition from in-house chief compliance officer to being an entrepreneur and starting your business. So talk to me more. I know you said you wrote the book and it helped with that, but what was it in you that decided you wanted to do this more widely and not just for one company?
I really wanted to be law partner. My sister just made partner at Melvin E. Myers. Good job, Kelly Wood. If you need employment counsel, call her. But I just had it in me that I wanted to be a partner in order to help multiple companies. The other thing that really drove me was I, as you probably know, to do speaking, to do writing, like to be out there, like to be on podcasts, like to have an opinion. And companies don't usually love that. Some of them do. Obviously, you and Lisa Fine are both in-house, have been in-house or are in-house. But I found it very restricting to have to get everything approved by my boss, for like them to look through all my slides, to say yes to one thing and not another. And that drive to be more of a public person was always in me. And I knew that need to express what I felt and what I wanted to share was greater than my need for that security. And so I thought I'd go ahead and take a chance.
Oh, I love that from you. You've been such a role model and mentor to me in this space, and we're very similar in terms of the urge to write and speak and be at these conferences. I really enjoy it myself as well. And you're right, it's not always possible. When I was at the SEC for 11 years, there was just nothing. You couldn't even make a post at the time. So I was restrained so much that I've come out swinging since then. But no, it's good to hear that was the motivation, and you do it so beautifully. So for everyone really listening, it's important to follow your passions. And I don't want to overlook what you said about that was more important to you than the fear or the insecurity of not having a paycheck every couple of weeks. They often say, don't they, say courage is not the absence of fear, it's knowing that something else is more important than your fear. And you are a great example of that. So thank you so much for sharing that part of your story. So much of your stories. You started by saying you like to travel. I wanted to ask you what you do when you're not at work. I do know, though, that you were in Antarctica recently with a bunch of very esteemed colleagues, friends, peers in the industry. Tell us a bit about your trip to Antarctica.
Oh, it was amazing. So it was my seventh continent. My desire to have work pay for me to travel turned out to go really well. Antarctica was not a business trip, but because of the nature of my jobs being in charge of Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and then the whole world at Paramount, I've been to 65 countries and I've been to 6 continents. Just the kind of life where you go. I didn't even travel internationally until I was in my 20s, right? I didn't grow up with a family that traveled the world. Aspired to it, and then suddenly it happened. So, yes, in Antarctica, one of my best friends, hi, Lisa Hall, she had decided that for her big 50th birthday, the best friends of us were going to go to Antarctica. So we planned it for 4 years. It was amazing. I had a great trip there. And what do I do when I'm not at work? I am an aerialist. I hang from the ceiling 12 to 16 feet in the air off silks and do tricks and drops. And I'm going tonight, and it's my favorite thing I do. I love it.
I knew that. You'd mentioned that to me before, but tell us why you love it so much. There's something about the freedom in there, isn't there? What is it you love about being a realist?
They call it flying. So when you're an aerialist, you fly. And that really is the feeling a lot of the time. And I also think that for people, like a lot of compliance officers get stuck in their head. I know I am person number one raising my hand for this, getting so obsessed with what's going on in the work or the business. And if you're hanging upside down 12 feet in the air, you are thinking about nothing other than hanging upside down 12 feet in the air. And what's your next move? How are you moving your body? Which way are the slopes supposed to go? And so I think there's so much freedom in the being away from gravity in some ways when you're in the air that way, but also having to be so present.
Mm.
And it's an incredible mixture of all of that, plus the endorphins that come from both the fear of some of the moves, but also the excitement of just exercise in general. So it's the greatest thing in the world. I can't recommend it more.
Yeah, I love, again, the idea of feeling so present and giving yourself the space to do that is just so wonderful. Don't we all need to fly sometimes? So
Yes.
might be inspiring me to check out my local offering of classes. That's wonderful. Um, what's your biggest inspiration? What's been your biggest inspiration when it comes to whether it's professional or personal life?
I think I'm very lucky. I had parents who really did believe that I could do anything. My sister said I'm going to be president of the United States, and they were like, "Fantastic, let's visit the White House." She's now a surgeon. She's not actually in politics, but I think that my greatest inspiration is the person I want to be and all the things I want to do with my life. And so I almost feel like I think it's she talks to me and I talk to her about like, where can we go? What could we do? And trying to always be inspired by the thing that's drawing me into the next part of my life.
That's magical, Kristy. So many people choose someone and they maybe compare the role model and mentor, like I said about you in my life. But you're so right. We should always be competing with our future self and asking ourselves who we want to be and how we get
Who do
there.
I want to be and how do I become the person who I want to be next? I think it's like that excitement of making choices based on who she is.
Who do you want, Kristy? I have to ask you then, who, because we always talk about what you want to do or what people want to do, but who do you want to be is a different question. So may I ask you, if it's not too intrusive, who do you want to be?
Well, you can. As I grow in my life, I actually really want to go. I'm doing some speaking now in women in business, women in entrepreneurship, women's sort of motivation, empowerment. As I grow, I want to continue to work in the compliance field, obviously, but to have more of a voice longer term in women more generally, because I think that especially women in my age group, it can feel, especially if you've got kids or parents that are declining, that you don't have space for your own dreams and your own time. And I think that we need more of a voice saying, yes, you can, yes, you should. And that's really who I want to be, is having that voice in a broader community as well.
I know community is very important to you, community mentorship, and you're a mentor to many. How have you built your community around you? What tips have you got for people that need to do that?
Oh, heavens. I think that community is everything. That is why this profession is so amazing, because I've never seen the kind of camaraderie anywhere else. I haven't worked in every industry, but certainly if you're in law, there's just a lot of bravado and competition. And I think that there is a sense of, if I am successful, you are not. And there's just not as much of the kind of joy and the ability to help and hear each other that we have in the compliance community, right? In terms of building community, I think that I'm a huge, heavy LinkedIn user, and I really enjoyed that environment, especially because I work from home. I'm remote. And so having that all the time is really critical. I love conferences. They're exhausting, but I love going. I love setting up meetings beforehand. At Spark Compliance, we always have had parties and events. I'm sure that will continue. And it just really matters. I think that people find networking to be this chore, and it can be, but it can also create opportunities. And I love introducing people to each other. I know that you're like that too. When I see somebody that I think, oh, that person, especially if they're young in the profession, and I can connect them to somebody in a job that they'd like someday or in an industry they'd like, there's nothing more fun than being in that role. So I think we should take advantage of the fact that compliance officers talk to each other and make that something that is the centerpiece of what we do.
It's so important. And you're right, we're a neighborhood here, definitely a community. And it doesn't feel like networking when you're in this kind of neighborhood. The Great Women in Compliance, Mary and Lisa have done a great job creating this community. And I'm just so thrilled to be able to take on the baton there for a bit. But I think it's really important to make sure we're there for each other and pay it forward. And I love the way that you do that. I've attended your events at conferences. I've been obviously just been so delighted to know every time we're at the same one, we get to spend time with each other. That's really important. And it's funny what you said at the beginning about you had to ask, what is compliance? When the recruiter first told you that. And people don't understand what compliance is, or that it's a career path, let alone do they understand how welcoming it is once you're here. So, yeah, thanks for reminding us of that as well and making sure we all do our part. And I love that who you want to be means that you're going to continue to bring us all into the fold. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. So, Kristy, let's turn to some of the substantive hot topics of the day. So you mentioned one of the things you did when you were at Gibson was FCPA work, and I know a lot of your clients are focused on that. We had some interesting pronouncements, or at least executive orders in the US recently, talking about whether or not FCPA enforcement is anti-competitive. And there's been a lot of questions around in the compliance community about what's going to happen next. I often say, forget change management. Managing anticipation of change is the thing we're doing right now. But Joe Murphy, another guru in the compliance field, put out a great article the other day about let's get real about what is and isn't happening right now. So I know you saw that. I read that. I thought it was very good. I reposted it. I think you did too. But what are your thoughts on what's happening? And what can we take from Joe or your insights here?
You should always pay attention to Joe. He's been a mentor to me as well, and I love him. Look, it's a scary time. I am always a proponent of the United States is only one place, and I think if you live here, it's very difficult to remember that. People wouldn't realize this, but Hemma and I are both British. I got my British citizenship in the 9 years I lived in London, and it gives you a very different perspective. Yes, the U.S. is a very important place, but there's also the rest of the world. And as we're seeing from the tariff challenges, there isn't anything or anywhere where other parts of the world don't affect us, whether it's getting the screws from China or Thailand or wherever it is that go into your product. We are an interconnected global community. And so what the U.S. is choosing to do for maybe 4 years, maybe longer, I don't know, with what the U.S. is choosing to do now doesn't mean that we won't have change. If you look at the politics of who gets elected, we usually run about 8 years in the modern era. So if it changes again, enforcement will change again. Statute of limitations continue longer, especially OFAC. OFAC is 10 now, 10 years for most violations. That is forever in politics. So if you're looking at what the rest of the world is doing, and they have some steady enforcement in many countries, and if you're looking at what the rest of the world is doing, even from a statute of limitations or an interconnectedness perspective, we still have long-arm laws in the UK. So I think that we need to not concentrate so much on what the executive order is doing. And look, I love the idea that everybody should just be compliant because it's the right thing to do and your company is ethical. And I'm not saying that isn't important, because if you're lucky enough to be at a company like that, then it doesn't matter. And I think it is lucky enough to be at them. I think it is short-sighted to say it's only about building the program and people will be good and you'll want a compliant culture and all that. If you've ever worked at a company where they don't care, that isn't helping. So you need to be able to talk about the fear element and about the culture and values element. I think that we can't just get lost in one or the other. It has to be both.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I know we're going to talk about the fear versus culture point in a moment, but just sticking with the FCP, I think you're right. Not only is it a global enforcement regime, but also we don't really know what's going to happen yet in the US when it comes to the priorities. We've got some indicators, but I think the current administration is allowed to review and think and make decisions, and I think that's all they've said they're going to do right now. Also, it's not always true to say that it's anti-competitive. We don't want a flood of bribe requests coming to American companies and American companies being targeted. So I think there's a lot there. And of course, the law is still the law. California still has a an anti-corruption law, as do many of the states. It's a felony in probably every state. Lots to be thinking about there, but I don't know that much has changed to your point, and I think Joe covers that really beautifully. What I liked about Joe's article is he gives you some real talking points. Yeah. Because it's one thing for us to talk and navel gaze ourselves in the community, in the neighborhood, but of course our role is also to give peace of mind and ease to our employees and our C-suite and our board. They might want to understand what we think is happening. To the degree we're supposed to be having the finger on the pulse, we need to be thoughtful about what we're saying and thinking here. Of that. And so, you look, talking about a fear-based compliance piece, I know you didn't say fear-based, you said that's also an important factor. I like to think about this a lot. And oftentimes I advise that we shouldn't be motivating by fear because it's not sustainable. I also like to say we should try to get away from designing a compliance program for the regulators and think more about what the business needs. So what about you? Can we get away from designing a program for cooperation credit, let's say, and instead focus on business impact? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So when I wrote How to Be a Wildly Effective Compliance Officer, I created this idea of the 4 primary motivators for why people want to be involved in compliance and ethics. And the one that most compliance officers have is what I call noble cause, which is I care. It matters to me. Why are people unethical? Because they shouldn't be. Another one is competitive edge. They want to win, right? The sales folks. But 2 of them are fear. One of them is fear for bad things happening to me. And the other one is bad things happening to this business that I love or have created or identify with the brand or whatever that is. When you think about these personalities, the noble cause, everything, why aren't we just good people? Look at the fear people and go, why do you need fear? What's wrong with you? Why do you have to be afraid? And the fear people look at the noble cause people and say, Pollyanna, ridiculous, totally not in this world. Who cares? Like these people are idiots. They don't know how the world works. Okay. So you have people, and in my experience now for 20 years in this world, you have people that are motivated by different things. If you do not talk to all of them, they will not hear you. So I think that the mistake we sometimes make is because we all really are believers and we believe in culture, we believe in impact, and we believe in all these things. If we have leaders, some of whom are motivated really by fear when it comes to compliance, you can try to undo their motivation, but it's not going to be as effective as actually helping them to, that's what's in it for me. Then we get to impact if you're a fear person, right? So I think that, I know I'm very unpopular with this opinion, but I don't care. I think that fear has to be part of it too, not because I think fear is important, because I've seen how other people respond. So you don't lead with that all the time. That's not what I'm saying. I think sometimes people mishear me. I'm not saying go into every meeting and say, we're all going to jail, or like bringing in people with the windbreakers to do a practice run of what it's like to be carted off in handcuffs, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's an important element in making sure people hear you, and ignoring it entirely is not beneficial.
That makes so much sense. There's a balance to be had. And I love your framing of we must think about the human indicators of motivation. I love that. And to your point, we're dealing with humans. We're not just dealing with the humans that are aligned with our way of thinking. We're dealing with all humans. And so absolutely. And look, maybe a yes and, because obviously fear is the reason we get our jobs. The whole industry was created because of the fear. So let's not pretend. And I agree with you. I could certainly be accused of being a bit Pollyanna-ish and out of touch when I talk a lot about the other piece. I do. I love to talk about the ease and peace of mind we can bring. But I think fear of not having ease and peace of mind, even beyond a regulator coming at your door, is another fear we can tap into. And I think that's where you and I agree, right? It's very similar. It's just a different type of fear. And my concern sometimes is if we over-index on the fear, and you've not said that, but if we over-index on the fear, we lose credibility and trust. And it feels like the boogeyman's coming, and it's a bit like the boy who cried wolf or the girl who cried wolf. It becomes more and more remote in a company that hasn't been under an investigation yet. Yeah.
I think there's a difference too between they're going to charge us $2 billion, right? And you could be fired, or you could have your name sullied and no one will hire you again because you were part of this conspiracy or scheme. And everyone in the industry knows each other, because I don't care what your industry is, everybody in the industry knows each other. And if you become that guy that committed that crime, or that person who everybody knows did this bad thing, that is equally punishing in terms of your personal experience. And it's not going to jail, but it's your unethical behavior caused you real problems for the rest of your career. That is a scary idea too. So it doesn't have to just be a numbers that no one can really understand or fathom. or the idea of jail time. It can also be the individual human problems that come from other people knowing that you did things that were really bad or being fired for doing things that were really bad. It's not a nice way to live your life. So I think that there's fear that can be understood that isn't some giant radical going to jail, and it's more real of getting fired, putting on a one of those plans that you're going to get fired at the end of it anyway. So I think that we can use it in different ways.
No, that's so insightful. And you're right. Look, there's the advent of individual criminal responsibility for these things that we oversee is very helpful in that respect. But even if you don't go to jail, just the insinuation or it's exhausting to be involved in a government investigation. And then, like you said, the reputational damage that you personally have in your industry is hard to escape, even if you don't have a ban or even if you aren't fired. So, yeah, I love that. Again, tapping into the real, back to the word impact, the real human impact that we should be afraid of if we don't try to do the right things. So no, I love that. That kind of bridges nicely to the next topic I want to take you to in terms of the future skill set that we should have as compliance officers. I'd like to say be human first and be balanced to your point. But what would you recommend would be the future skill set that we should be thinking about as compliance professionals?
I think that we just have to be more and more technology adept and just accept it. It is not going to change. Yes, you have to learn a new thing every minute. I'm currently going through onboarding at a large corporate company. I've had a small company for 5 years. I forgot just how many things you have to fill in and check the boxes and do the training and see the thing. And to a certain degree, even I am looking at this and going, these are all programs I've never dealt with. And they're all coming at me at once because that's what happens when you're at a new company. But that's going to be happening for us, period, right? When I look around what the technology companies in the industry are doing, obviously I don't know what all of them are doing, but when I see like how they're thinking about AI or when we go to conferences and they're starting to talk about what's available, you just have to go with it. And I think there's a natural resistance to, but I've never had to do it this way, or that's not the way I like to do it. And that doesn't matter. You have to get comfortable with that. And that is a decision, I think, to allow yourself to not resist.
Right.
That is essentially a choice because people feel that resistance. If you don't want to do it, even if you're being and you feel like you're being forced to, they feel your energy. Accept that. I think the compliance officer of the future in particular has to be really good at working groups because when we use the word silo, I think too much. But when I think of the working group element, anybody who comes into it saying, this is my piece and I'm not going to share it and I don't want to be around it and I'm not going to, and I see it more with IT to be fair. But if you come in with, I'm not going to work with you, or if the IT people are looking at the compliance people saying these people don't understand anything, and that may be true, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to help when we're talking about privacy or we're talking about ethical frameworks or we're talking about whatever it is. And I think that the less collaborative you are, the worse off you are. So ability to collaborate and listen, stop, collaborate and listen, as it were, again, and people of my age. So I think that the more you can do that, the more important that's all going to be. And I just think you just need to be super open to opening your knowledge and being more global. I think, especially when you're in like US healthcare or something that's very US specific or very Europe specific, very UK specific, very Asia specific, whatever it is, it's easy to get caught up in whatever your individual regulations are, but you're probably going to switch jobs at some point. And knowing what's going on in the world from a compliance perspective and from a trend perspective is so important because you don't want to try to catch up 10 years from now. You want to be watching. And so the broader context, not just being involved in your company intellectually, but being involved in a greater way is really important.
Mm-hmm. You've just given me the new subheading for our episode title, Stop, Collaborate and Listen. That's brilliant. Oh, so many good things to unpack there. I just wanted to go back to what you said at the top of the segment where you mentioned your onboarding and your experience as a new employee. So yes, there is something there. I always like to think about our role as compliance officers in creating that experience, right? Some of us on the compliance side are the reason you've got all this onboarding training, right? And so not only should we embrace the changes, but we should also take our place in this revolution and make sure that we can leverage the existing technology and the new technology to make the experience smoother for our employees. I also love the sentiment you gave of that it can be infectious, our attitude to it. Not just people will notice if we're not into it and don't want to, but we can actually be the inadvertent gatekeepers of this stuff. Like some of our colleagues might be saying, stop, do not use AI, forget collaborate and listen, just stop, plain old stop. And I know there were early policies that went that way when we didn't understand where it was going, but I think now we all have to evolve. and not just help the business keep moving forward where it's likely to go anyway, be really realistic about where it's going, but help them to do so responsibly. And I would say I would go one step further and be an advocate for it and unlock the exciting opportunities we've got. For example, the improved customer and compliance experience is one of them that we'll be partly responsible for. So I love that you bring that up. So many good things. But you mentioned jobs, you might change jobs, and you talked about the resilience you might need to be flexible and understand global regulations, different types of things. I know when I was at Zendesk, I was given cybersecurity compliance, a whole thing I'd never done, right? It's like a big thing, privacy, these sorts of things can be a stretch for sure, and you have to be nimble. But with all the transition we're seeing, I've transitioned out of Zendesk. How do you future-proof your career now, given that we know you have to be nimble in this space?
I think that you 100%, the classic line, build your network before you need it. So make that a focus for yourself. Go on LinkedIn, go to the conferences, do the things that you need to do to build your network now and know it will be there, and to do favors now, because then people are ready to help you when you are there. And also, it's fun to do favors for people. It really is. Being able to be part of that. I think being focused on what's coming next from a global perspective will really put you in good stead. I always think that being a writer and a speaker is beneficial, whether you're writing blogs that get published, working with the SCCE or compliance week or whomever it is. The more that you can show that you know what you're talking about and really truly show it. I'm always being asked, do I know people who are good speakers? Call me if you want to be a speaker. I can tell I can recommend you, because we need thought leadership. And if you are a thought leader, the word leader is already in your title. So in terms of future-proofing your career, it's both building your network, but building your credibility through that type of thought leadership, whether it's a local conference or a local networking group, whatever that is, or a national one. And just being open and ready to understand regulations that may not apply to your company now, but may apply to one later. I always love this story. I was interviewing for the head of North America at one of the companies I was consulting with and helping them hire the right person. And they had issues with Cuba. There was a bunch of problems with the Cuba business. And this person sent me with his resume an article that he'd written. It was published in SCCE magazine about the Cuba compliance trade issues. And I was like, gosh, I wonder who I'm going to hire. Also, he was lovely. But it was the fact that you literally sent me your thoughts on this as part of your application. So if he hadn't been thinking about that and writing about it before, it wouldn't have been published and available for him to send with. So I think when you think about your career long term, it's positioning yourself in a way that people know who you are and can vouch for you and say, oh, yeah, they're terrific. You should definitely consider them. And really just having a good attitude it goes so far. Hemma, you have such warm, beautiful, infectious energy. And when people are around someone with that passion and excitement for what they do and appreciation for what we get to do, it changes other people's experience of what compliance is and can be. So that, I think, just adopting behavior that makes it so that you are seen as a positive individual can really make a difference.
That's very kind of you to say about me, and so much good advice there. And I will personally attest to just how right you are. You and I, we said we're both from the UK, and we've managed to come to another country and create a neighborhood. And I say that not to brag, but to say it's possible to start with nothing and create a neighborhood for yourself and for others. There's this kind of concept, and you said that yourself, be generous and grow to give and be a generous thought leader. You'll be touching other people's lives, and you'll never know. There may become a moment where you need something and people will step up without you asking. And I've certainly seen that myself over the last 6 to 7 months. So many people have stepped in to help me, be kind, make connections for me without even asking many occasions. So I certainly echo what you said. I think it's brilliant. Again, thank you for being a great role model there. And I hope our listeners see that it can feel daunting, but really the route to ease and peace of mind is doing what you love. As you said, we love it anyway. So we're grateful for that. But also just the neighborhood is very generous. So do your part there. Give a lot and grow a lot, and you'll see that we'll be future-proofed in many ways. And again, how lucky we are to be alive right now. I love that quote from Hamilton, right? Like how lucky we are to be alive right now that we can connect, even though we work remotely, even though we're in different countries. It's really quite magical what we can achieve even through the screen. So yes, I agree. I don't want to turn the mood because that just has filled me with joy speaking about that. But one of the questions that might be on the mind of compliance officers beyond the SCPA things we've talked about is what's happening with pushback, and some of it I understand, to the ESG phenomenon, pushed out to the DEI phenomenon. Is compliance going to go that same way? And are we rubbing up our business partners the wrong way so much that there'll be pushback for us soon? What do you think about that? What's the future of compliance?
No, I'm a lawyer at heart, right? If we actually get down to it, I'm a lawyer. And sorry, everybody. Apologies for that. But trade sanctions aren't going away, right? The anti-bribery laws in the rest of the world aren't going away. Data privacy laws aren't going away. Antitrust enforcement isn't going away. When you talk about things like DEI that are really important for culture and really important, frankly, to grow companies in a way that's more sustainable, it isn't the law. And there is a big difference. And ESG transparency in some ways is the law in certain places, but ESG itself is not. So you're dealing with a very different experience when you're DEI and ESG in a lot of places are hearts and minds exercises and good culture and value exercises. Do not mishear me. I am not saying that those things aren't important because I fundamentally believe that they are. And I think companies that commit to those things and have actually strong value bases there, especially with their Gen Z employees, will thrive. But the question is compliance going to go that way? And I think absolutely not. Because at the bottom of it, if you've got a fear-based place or the people who are fear-based in your executive team, they still can get dinged for these kind of things. They can still, if they, God forbid, you get on a trade sanctions list, then they can't do business like with anybody. No, I don't think that it's the same. I think that compliance, our biggest threat would be that we get subsumed again into legal, so much so that we're not a separate entity. Right. That, I think, is if you want to go to catastrophizing, we just become legal again and we don't have the values and culture elements and we don't have the training things and we don't have what we have carved out as our specialty and niche. I think that will happen in some companies, but I think for the most part, we are fundamentally different than the ESG DEI experience because it's all based in actually you have to, and it's not maybe, it's not do you want to, it's this is the law and we have to abide by it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a need to operationalize the legal requirements, and that just isn't going to change. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. The legal requirements just keep on layering on and getting
I
more.
hadn't noticed. Is that true?
Ah, don't think and you'll miss it. I wanted to ask one other question, which I don't hear asked very much, and I don't even know the answer, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So a lot of our listeners will be aspiring chief compliance officers. They want to get to that top C-suite role, and I understand that. And there's lots of people that can mentor, lots of great CCOs in our neighborhood that can mentor us if we want to go there. What about the person that's been a CCO for a while and is looking for their next right thing? And like whatever might happen with what's in the world, this is, I've heard this is a moment where people are thinking about who they want to be in the future. So my question for you is, what would be the next step for a CCO? What should they be looking for in terms of progression if they're ambitious and they want to progress their career?
I think that when you get to a C level at anything, you're so specialized, and that's not a negative thing, right? If you're a master, if most people don't look at CEOs and say, what else do you want to be a CCO or do you want to, there are CFOs that move into the CF and the CE, they change, but that's really it, right? So I think that for the most part, it really is a progression of either bigger companies or more interesting industries, places where you can actually, so I think the growth tends to be sideways. And then the upgrow tends to be board membership is what I hear about all the time. There is so many senior in their career women in particular who are very interested in boards that are coming out of compliance. I think there's still a ceiling right now, but I really am excited to see that moving. I do think that we have so much to offer in terms of board experience and board capacity, not only being in front of boards, but also because that government expectation of people understanding the culture of the company and understanding compliance obligations and being able to talk about the investigations reports and all the things is a skill. And I think that will begin to be valued differently as these expectations continue to grow and change. Diversity on boards includes diversity of background, which can include things like being a compliance officer, right? We're still a relatively new career people who are now graduating into a very senior space. And the other part is people going to mentoring and consulting, right? Once they've done it, it's a very different job to mentor and to consult than it is to be within the business as a job goes. But the ability to talk to people about, I've seen this problem before, I know how to fix it, is powerful and a really fun place to live. So I think that I don't think we're going to end up in other parts of the C's. I think we're going to continue to break ground in expectation that compliance officers are good board member choices and that we will be able to continue to, frankly, I wanted to travel and entertainment for my 2 in-house roles. What did I say I love? I started at Paramount Pictures. I loved entertainment. I loved movies and film and TV. And then I loved travel. So I got to go into the industries I wanted to, but it was a focused decision.
Yeah.
So if you're in sock making and you don't like socks, then you'd rather be in a technology company, you can do that, right? So I think that some of it is finding what you're interested in and figuring out who works in that niche and getting yourself to where you want to go next in some place that's more interesting to you.
Oh man, Christy, I love that again, always spot on with your advice because and enlightening because it is the focus. I like to say knowing what you want is harder than getting what you want. And again, you get to a certain level in your career where you think I've arrived and I feel guilty for asking for more, but you really shouldn't. You should be able to finally tap into what you really care about. And then back to the point you made earlier, there is a neighborhood for you to create around that. So once you really can focus on that neighborhood, people will be generous. I'm sure even more generous at that level. So I love that advice. We don't often cater to our CCO you've arrived level listeners, right? We cater to those that are coming up and inspired by them. But I love that you've got some concrete advice for them. So thank you. Again, I could speak with you all day. And I hope you come back again. Not 7 years. Do not wait 7 years. This time we'll have you back much sooner. But let me ask you, if I may, have you got any parting thoughts for our Great Women in Compliance listeners?
I always think that this is such a hard job and that your resiliency can come from a reminder that we are, in fact, changing the world. I don't know if how many people here have watched the television program Silicon Valley. It's one of my favorites. But one of the characters are always saying, "We're changing the world through mini and out compression systems that blah blah," blah, and no one knows what that means, right? We actually are changing the world as a group because when you change how business is done, when you change anti-competitive experiences, when you change there was a train station in Serbia that collapsed because of bribery and the people are mad
Right.
and they should be. When we're doing our jobs, we are influencing those movements that are changing the world. And then from wherever you're sitting, and if you are sad, miserable, somebody's yelling at you, your policies are awful, you don't know how to fix them, remembering that as an aggregate, we are some of the biggest change makers in the whole world because of our jobs.
Right.
It should give you strength, and remembering why you're here and what you're doing in a larger scale is an incredible honor and something I'm proud to be part of.
I couldn't agree more. Our legacies are not out of reach. There is something really important we're doing here. And I love that you've really highlighted throughout this episode the interconnectedness, whether it's the global interconnectedness, the neighborhood, the community, the fact that what we do matters somewhere else. And we will certainly have you back soon. Really appreciate you, Christy. Thank you.
Thanks, Hemma.